Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast with me, Karen Maloney. I am your host, and the intention of this podcast is to help us open our minds, get curious about ourselves, and to raise our vibration and consciousness levels. Through these conversations, we hope that you will go on an inward journey to discover the truth of who you are and to become aware of your own energy and vibration. We have the power to consciously create our lives, but we need to wake up to this fact before we can begin the process and learn the key of self-responsibility. Check out the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Acast, Castbox, or whatever platform you listen on, and please like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Leave a review, leave a rating, as this will help it to reach more people. Check out my website as well, Soul Power Light, www.soulpowerlight.com. Hello everybody, it's me, Karen Maloney again, and thank you for tuning in for another episode. You're very welcome, and thanks to all of you who join week after week and share and spread the word of the podcast. Just know that I really appreciate it. A couple of quick announcements before we get into today's show and I introduce today's guest. I invite you to go to my website and check out the shop tab in the pop-out menu and check out some of the upcoming events and things I have happening, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, uncertain, or really stressed at the moment. I have new one-to-one emotional well-being facilitation sessions that are 30 minutes. I also have a full moon meditation relaxation workshop coming up this weekend, Saturday the 31st of October, for a time to relax, rewind, renew and release, and I will guide you through that. And also on the 11th of November, I have an awakening mentorship group. So anyone who may have gone through an awakening, is feeling a bit lost, a bit confused, disconnected, isolated, or just not really sure what the hell is going on, come join me there as well, a space to ask questions and to share tools to help you navigate. So again, pop on to my website, soulpowerlight.com, and click the shop section on the pop-out tab menu, and all details are there. Today I have a fantastic guest as always, and her name is Vanessa Codorniu, and she goes by the name of the Biz Bruja, and she'll explain exactly what a bruja is. But Vanessa is known as a teacher of teacher and healer of healers. She is an acclaimed international intuition teacher, clinical hypnotherapist, and soul business mentor who has hosted more than 10,000 intuitive sessions in the US and Latin America in her 27 years of service. As the creator of the School of the Healing Artes and the Mind, Body, Spirit Hypnosis Institute, Vanessa has integrated her 27 years as a clinical hypnotherapist, priestess, shamanic practitioner, astrologer, and teacher of intuition, Reiki, and the Akashic Records to create her signature, transformative, and enriching experience that yields practical tools and lasting inner shifts. The renowned Argentine-American started doing readings at 16 after her family confirmed that she was seeing and knowing things accurately about people who were no longer with them. She guides seekers to break through fears and connect to the practical power of their intuition so they can serve the world powerfully with their gifts. And she is also the host of the Biz Bruja podcast. This is a super conversation with Vanessa for anyone and everyone who wants to learn more about intuition and learning how it can show up for us and also how it comes in. We often may feel that it needs to come in all bells and whistles and screaming, and that's how we know what's right for us. But often, as Vanessa explains, it can be the very opposite, and usually is. Vanessa also touches a little bit on beliefs and looking at what is it within us that we need to shift in order to truly experience what exactly we do want. So in this conversation, she shares lots of information and wisdom and tips for us all, as well as a beautiful practice that we can do to help release some limiting beliefs that no longer serve us, as well as some beautiful mantras that she shares. So all in all, a really beautiful conversation, and Vanessa really has a beautiful energy about her as well. So you can check out more on her work or her podcast on the bizbruja.com. That's BRUJA. But as always, everything will be linked as well on my website, soulpowerlight.com, and click podcasts and Vanessa's episode. Enjoy. Welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I have a wonderful guest, and even just from speaking for a couple of moments there, super excited. So welcome Vanessa, Biz Bruja, you're also known as well. So maybe explain a little bit what is Bruja. A lot of people may not know that word, and a little bit about your work.
Hi Karen, I'm so excited to be here. La Bruja is another word for the witch, and it's even more than that. At the same time, I think that we don't truly even understand what a witch is. And I'm from South America, and La Bruja is, while it has been demonized, looked down upon, ostracized in society, there is an awakening that's been happening, I think, for several decades with the word witch in English. But now there's like this reclaiming that's going on with the word bruja. And, you know, brujas were the doulas, were the midwives, were the connectors and the networkers in communities, in our villages and our towns. Like, oh, you need this? Oh, I've got, hey, Annie, come here, Anna, you know, or Maria's got this. It's the connector. It's the person who also studied or understood the stars, connected to nature, connected to the elements. They may or may not have a deeper intuition. I think that brujas do have deeper intuition because we're all intuitive, but that's the energy of the word. It's the connector. It's the person who's there for the community and is there to support healing, inspiration, to bring awareness, education. And we're reclaiming the word because, as I said, you know, it's been demonized into this woman with this dark hat, or in this little cave, or in this little home with little spells and doing evil things. When in truth, it was like a shaman, like a medicine woman, really. A curandera. So that is the word that came to me. And I was like, oh my God, okay, let's reclaim it, Vanessa, let's do it. And I did it. So thank you for asking.
I love it. And thank you for sharing. And I think it's so important. And I love that you've reclaimed that part because, you know, you mentioned there as well, the shifts we're in and the times we're in. And I think it's really important that we all reclaim our own kind of hidden parts or inner voice, especially women as well. Because like that, there were so many healers, whether the word bruja existed or witch, a lot of women were the healers and the cures and, you know, making herbal teas and all these kind of things, even in Ireland. Yes. So yeah, I love that as well. And maybe we might get a chance to dive in a little bit more.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely, Karen. I wanted to say too, I think you may know about this, that from the 1400s to the late 1700s, there was a Holocaust of women and healers in Europe. So it wasn't just, the demonizing of the shaman or healer from Africa or from South America or Siberia or China. It happened in Europe as well. And so, yes, Irish women have to reclaim their inner healer. And all of us do, Latinas, Latinx, everyone. So.
Yeah, I got goosebumps as well when you were saying that. Yeah, it's true, you know, and like that, you know, people talk about witches burned at the stake and healers burned at the stake and outcasted from communities and all that. But it really was happening and on a huge scale, and purely just for that reason of that intuitive knowing. You know, that otherworldly aspect that, you know, I think a lot of us have, but especially women as well, have that more earthly wisdom connection. And that's nothing against men. That's just, you know, that's the piece they bring to the puzzle as well.
Exactly. And, you know, when it was happening, it was not just the Judeo-Christian religions that were taking over everywhere, right? Because there are sacred spaces in Ireland where it was for Saint Brie, right? Or Bridget.
Bridget, yeah.
Bridget. And then they changed it and they turned it from the goddess into the saint. And absolutely. And it was also a money-making opportunity because they charged the family and they charged the person that they were torturing or arresting. So yes, it's a sad time.
Yeah. But, also I'm like, as well, it's the acceptance of what's happened has happened.
Yeah.
And, that's evolution as well. But we're in a new era now. So
Yeah.
maybe let's go there now, since this is the way the conversation has started. How do you in your work, maybe explain a little bit more about your work, but how can you help people as well to connect more to that intuitive knowing and that inner intuition?
Yeah, so I was very blessed to be in a South American family that believed in intuition, believed in dreams, believed in connection with those who'd crossed over to the other side. And so as a young child, I always had it. And so I start there because I want to encourage everyone that even if they don't feel like they're intuitive, we are all intuitive, because a lot of us are, shut down, put down. Hey, there is no imaginary friend. That's silly. That you have to use your head. Don't give power to that. You're superstitious. So I didn't have that. So I'm grateful. But if anybody's listening and you've been shut down or you've been scared because you saw or heard something that later came true, we're all born intuitive. People might argue, but what I would offer you is that if you're from a spiritual bent, you would say that everything is connected, right? Through spirituality. And so we're divinely receiving messages. If you're more on the scientific side of things, we can say that everything is energy. And so we are constantly sending and receiving energetic information. We're constantly doing it, right? Telepathy, thoughts. And one of the ways that we can start to reclaim our intuition, start to reconnect even more, is one, by understanding that, yes, we're all intuitive, that two, it's natural, that even if we've heard stories or it's been demonized also, et cetera, that we're in a time now where we are safe, right, to be intuitive.
Yeah.
Thankfully, as we started this convo, we're now in, right, 2020, and we're moving forward into the next year soon. So one of the ways is to understand that we're all intuitive. Another way that it's natural. Another way I would say is to spend some time. So there are two questions I want to ask the audience. Spend some time figuring out how you receive information, right? Because all of us receive information in different ways. Some of us hear it. It could be our own voice. It could be another voice. Some of us see images or visions, or we see certain signs. Like I had a client who's like, I don't know if I should move to California. And next thing you know, she's praying and asking, please give me the information that I need to make this decision. She goes into her dentist office. California Girls is playing. She goes out to a New York cab. She gets in, and the car in front of her has the license plate, California. Yeah. Everywhere she goes, there's a California song. There's somebody, the driver's from California. Something happens where she's like, okay. So it's hearing, it's seeing signs, it's feeling, right? Emotional, like we talk about empaths, emotional intuitives. There's also sensing in your body. Sometimes you have a gut feeling. You have like the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, or your arms, however it goes, right? You get little goosebumps. There's so many different ways to be intuitive. And in order to be able to trust it more, connect to it, we need to understand, well, how do I receive this information? So for us to get clear on that, I would say, take a breath and remember, was there ever a time when you got a feeling or a thought or a vision or whatever, or a sense, right? And you didn't follow through. And later you were like, oh, why did I not listen, right? Because even I'm a professional intuitive for like years now, decades. And now I listen, but before there were times I didn't. And I'm like, oh. And so when we think back on those, let's breathe in and be like, well, how did it come through? Was it just a knowing, right? Because that's claircognizance. Did we just know, right? Without knowing how we knew? Did we see something? Did we hear it? Did we feel it? And then the second question is, think back, feel into a time where you sensed something, intuited, and then it was on point and you listened and you were like, yeah, right? So the time when you didn't, the time when you did, how did it come through? And once you start to understand that, you're going to be able to pay more attention when it comes up again.
Yeah, for sure. Love that. And it's super important that we know how it comes through for us. But then how, sometimes I know, even I come across a lot of people as well, they don't know to trust it or not, or they don't actually know whether it's their own truth and intuition or it's something else, or, something that's been implanted from a family member or a collective seed or something like that. How can you help people as well to decipher their own truth?
Oh, that's such a great question, because I think that we're needing our intuition more than ever, right? And I know that because we were talking about that. We need to, I would say, first figure out or sit down and ask yourself, like, how do I receive it, right? So now you're observing that. The second thing I would say is to move away from everyone else. Now, even temporarily take a walk. If something is weighing on you, like somebody's like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. You can't be an artist. Let's say it's because you said, what if it's a collective seed? What if you really want to be an artist and your family's like, no, you're going to starve. You're going to starve. No, you're going to starve, right? And then you start to get really scared. You start to get really tense and you're like, is it my intuition? What is it? Get away from everyone for a moment. Take a walk, take a breath. Allow yourself to be in your own energy, right? Sit down on a bench or just keep walking, breathing, and then noticing, just, calm your nervous system, because people telling you something or seeing the news or whatever is going to stress you out. Set up, your system to be really like, release all the stress hormones and such. You want to just bring it down. And once you do, you ask yourself, what do I need to know about, let's say, the question, becoming an artist? And the things we need to look out for with real intuition is it usually comes in very calmly. Is when we think of our intuition is part of our higher knowing, right? Our higher self is that eternal part of us. So our higher self isn't always really stressed about dying or getting sick or anything like that, because it knows the truth that our soul lives and moves on, right? And continues growing. It's that human part. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So it's the human that makes the drama. But when we're really calm and we breathe and we get away from any factors that are like affecting us, right? Our nervous system, we ask that question and we say, okay, what do I need to know? And then notice, and it'll come in repetitively. So intuition is usually repetitive. It's usually pretty simple. And I'll explain why how that comes through. So repetitive, simple. It's usually objective. Okay. And to that, I wanted to share briefly. So in 2012, it was December 21st, 2012. And I was heading out to a vacation with my family in Miami. We were driving out to a cabin. And my mom stepped out and said, I feel something weird about the car. It was like 6 a.m. I'm like, me too. And all right, we both get in. She goes, I'm going to pray. I'm like, I'm going to do Reiki symbols and like protect the car with the Reiki energy, right? The healing energy. We start driving. I have my legs stretched out, and I know it's a no-no, in front of the two front seats. So my dad's driving, and I have my legs stretched out. So my feet are kind of in between them, and I'm stretched out to the back seat sleeping. I hear, sit up straight so you don't break your back. That's what I hear. So I already know my intuition. I am very auditory, and I'm also very claircognizant. I know things. I sat. Right? So I sat up immediately and said, sit up so you don't break your back. There wasn't oh my God, you're going to have an accident. Wow. It was just, Vanessa, sit up so you don't break your back. I sat up. Take off your bracelet on your right hand. It's too thick. It'll hurt you. I had a big clunky. I took it off, put it away in my bag. Then I heard, make sure your parents have their seatbelt on. So I said, Mom, Dad, and I was half asleep because it's like 6:30 in the morning. I was like, hey, you have your seatbelt on? My mom didn't. She clicked it on. Then I'm like closing my eyes like, okay, let me sleep now. Within minutes, the tire exploded. We lost control of the car and started careening into a truck, right? In that moment, I'm holding on because I can, right? I have my hand pushed into the back seat, my feet into the ground, into the bottom of the car and the car floor. And I'm holding on, and I'm like, wow, I'm going to die now. I didn't go full time with my sacred work. Like, come on, I haven't met, I've had a lot of loves, but I haven't married yet. Like, I was going through all these things. And I kept hearing, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. My dad was able to take control. Before we crashed, we started rolling. We flipped 2 or 3 times. I did not have a seatbelt. I was holding on. Nothing happened to me. When we landed, right? So the glass was breaking, was shattering around me. We land. My parents are hanging from the top, which is really the bottom. They're hanging from the seatbelts at the ceiling. And I'm looking up at them and sitting there like, am I alive? I was in shock. What is this? They're hanging upside down. I'm dead, right? So I kept thinking I was dead already, and it was just my spirit. So I was like, Spirit, can I hang out and let them know that I love them, that everything's going to be okay? They're like, no, you're alive. Everything's okay. What I kept hearing from my intuition and within me was like, you're fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everybody's going to be fine. You're fine. So I helped them. I realized I was alive. I helped them get out of their seatbelt. We crawled out. As I crawled out, I heard, do not go back to your corporate job. I had been laid off 3 months before surgery.
Mm.
And in the last 8 years, I've been full-time online, though I've been part-time all my life. And so I share that really dramatic experience because even in something like that, your intuition is not going to come in, oh my God, what? Wait, it's not going to do that, right? It's
Cause
not going to be
panic.
like, right. And I'm being really dramatic, so you laugh, but also maybe so you also recognize yourself because we all do that. We all go there. So it's not, you're not going to go into a panic. You're not going to go into a drama. You're going to be like, oh, wow, okay, do this, turn right, go left, don't do that. Intuition comes in these ways. It's like, that's not good for you. This is not a good relationship for you. It'll say
Mm.
things like that, or that's not a good thing, things like that. We will overlook it because we doubt ourselves, because we think it should be more dramatic like TV and movies. But I wanted to share that story because it's going to be repetitive. It's going to be objective. Now, listen, after you get the information, you might react, right? Because we're all human beings. So you might, talk to your great grandfather. They might pass, right? You
Yeah.
might get that information. And then you get it really calmly, but then you're like, what? And then you start crying, right? Because
Yeah,
then you're
that's
human.
kind of the question that, or something that popped in my head there as well. Or I imagine a lot of listeners were like, "Oh my God, if you got that message, why weren't you screaming to say stop the car before something happened?"
Because I was half asleep, and I'm
Yeah,
glad you asked. I was half asleep,
yeah, that's what I
and I
felt.
I was really kind of a little unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
I was like really, and it said, sit up straight so you don't break your back. Told it
Yeah,
was
I
an
can imagine
accident.
you're doing it in a, like you say, you're half asleep. But again, that's the importance of listening.
Exactly. I
Even
didn't
when
really,
you're half asleep, you can still hear.
right. And I didn't really know. And I'll tell you that my dad had a little bit of glass on his forehead. He was
Mm.
fine. My mom actually had a silent heart attack during the thing because of the seatbelt and the bag that opened up,
Yeah.
right? And she was fine. And that also set her up to be supported and taken care of. She used to overdo and take care of everyone.
Mm.
And now everything had to be turned around and we had to take care of her. And I walked out fine, but then never went back to corporate. So there was something about that situation, because you're asking why didn't, because I was really half asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I didn't even like, it didn't make sense to me. Before you break your back, I'm like, what do you talk? I didn't even,
Yeah. It
yeah.
didn't register in your
But it's like,
human
break,
kind of conscious
right,
mind.
brace it off because you'll hurt yourself. I'm like, I don't know. I just took it off.
Yeah.
There's seatbelts on. Okay. I was
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I mean, I was in shock after I crawled out. I was in shock.
Mm.
It was just like, what happened? I heard go full, because I also heard go full time and just do what you need to do. And it was very just a directive. And what
Yeah.
I understood from that is like, we held you during this weird accident. You will be fine. You will survive online. You'll be able to support yourself. You will. We got your back, Vanessa.
Mm.
And then my parents were fine, and my mom healed. And from then on, I think everybody started taking care of her more. It changed the dynamic. So, but I'm glad you asked that question because you know what? I've shared this story with people. Nobody's asked that. They're like, why don't you stop the car? I'm like, I didn't even like register
Yeah.
because I was like, break my back. Okay, I'll sit up. It was one of those things. But just for anyone, if you're ever in a situation and you start to panic, like take a deep breath in and allow yourself to kind of come back to your heartbeat, to your breath. Like we have the tools, crystals are great, incense is great, all of the things are beautiful. We don't need them to tap into our,
Mm.
they help us. But if you're ever stuck in an elevator, if you're ever in a bad situation, even with the pandemic, with everything that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
around the world, just take that breath, go back to your breathing in and out, observing in and out, and just go, what do I need to know about this right now?
Yeah, so important. And, like you say, especially now with all the fear that's just been pumped out there as well. And it's kind of like, okay, yes, there's a reality. Yes, there is a pandemic. We all know this. But do I need to live in that fear 24/7? I think that's the question we all need to ask ourselves. And why do I need to keep stuck to the news that's just perpetuating this fear within me that's just destroying me?
Yes. I
So,
agree, Karen, and it's such an important point that you're making that we don't need to do that. We don't. It's harming our nervous system.
mm,
It's harming our energetic system, our spirits. It's good to be aware, take all precautions,
mm-hmm.
and allow ourselves to. And I know that some women, some people are home with kids and they're trying to work, and it's overwhelming for some people.
Yeah.
Try to get that moment, whether it's in the shower, in the bath, if you can take that little walk. I mean, for God's sakes, go in a closet if you need to do whatever you need to do. I've seen it before. To get just a moment where you just observe your breath, because you come back to yourself. And we can't be on hyper mode all the time. We can't be on stress hormone overload. It'll burn us out.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Or something like maybe your accident, the universe will step in and give us something bigger to wake us up, to bring us back to that presence and back to that higher connection and out of that frantic mode.
Yes.
Happens sometimes as well. So that's why, the intention of these conversations is, and everything as well, is to help us all to begin, that curious looking at our lives, taking a moment, opening our minds, thinking, do I actually need to live in this way all the time? How is it serving me? Because if we can, like you say, do that now and take those little moments to observe our breath, to come back to our heart, everything has the potential to shift.
Yes.
So... Well, you do so much in your work, between being an intuition teacher, a clinical hypnotherapist, and a soul business mentor. What aspect of your work is your favorite, or what's been coming up a lot for you that you've really enjoyed?
So I have to really be honest that I love it all. And, I'm going through a shift right now. And I wanted to say that I started reading people when I was 16. And at 22, I went professional. I was an event organizer, and a psychic who was hired for that event in New York City said, let me just read you to warm up. And then she's like, why aren't you doing what you're supposed to do? And she told me about what I'm doing. So it's been a very long time. I would say that what's happening now, what's rising up in me now, is I've always been a leader. I held circles in New York City for 20 years, really not charging much for 12 years, and then charging $11. I really wanted it to be for the community. What's coming up for me now is really supporting the next generation of healers and leaders, right? For everyone, and especially focusing in on highlighting and bringing in more healers of color. We've seen continuously from the bigger publishing houses throughout, the last 30 years, 40 years, overemphasis on white teachers. And that's wonderful and great. I think that there has to be right? Yeah. There's also and Black and Indigenous and Brown and there's and that's where I'm really been very excited during the pandemic. So I've always taught classes while I had people I was coaching in their businesses, while I also booked out sessions if somebody needed a past life regression through hypnosis or an Akashic record reading, right? I would do those too. But during the pandemic, I wound up losing all my coaching clients when they lost their jobs or their businesses took a hit in March and April. And I sat down and meditated and asked Spirit, what's next? And I did not teach Reiki online. I'll be honest, I only taught it in person. I taught intuition online, Akashic records, like other things, how to build a business online. But I was guided and I started doing the pay what you can. So what wound up happening is all these folks, like young 20s, 30s, start to come through. And I created a school now, the School of the Healing Arts, or we could say Healing Artes. I wanted it to be both, right? If anybody was bilingual. And so now the teacher that's always been there and I've always been doing it is like full force. I think stepping into the role of guide. I'm not a full elder yet, but both my parents passed in the last year, not from COVID. And when they passed, I didn't, everybody experiences grief differently. Some people need to shut down. I cry every day still, just so everybody knows. It's not like my mom was my best friend. She's the OG Bruja, the original, the original gangsta Bruja she was. And she loves me and she's here, my father too. Say that their strength from the other side has kind of pushed me more to be visible, to be in the spotlight, to stand for the next generation. And so I think that what's exciting me now is stepping in to hold space, to open that door for the next and generation, for myself as well, right? Like I'm working on a book and I'm working on things, but just really going, okay, it's on, let's go. The world needs us. So I'm very much like, come on. I know you're scared. I was there too. Because, when I first started, there was no Wi-Fi. And and I'm talking about reading. And then when I stepped out doing hypnosis, the Wi-Fi came 2 or 3 years later. I didn't even think about that. It was only until I got laid off the day after a surgery and a breakup and then the car accident that I was like, I'm going to go online and be location free. So the leadership energy, the teaching energy, and we were talking about earlier that during the pandemic, a lot of folks reached out with a lot of ancestral patterns and fears
Yeah.
coming. That's been exciting too.
Wow. Yeah. I love so much of what you said there, especially even like that, taking the time to just stop and ask spirit, what's next? Instead of
Yeah.
going into victim role. Because again, well, I believe anyway, there is always a higher divine order to everything, no matter what is happening here. And it's challenging and difficult for all of us. But again, we always have that choice. Do I sink or do I swim? Do I get woe me at life, or like that? Do I go, okay, do I get curious and explore? Well, what direction am I being shown? So I love that. And I think it's super important for everyone as well to realize they have that power as well to make new choices and to be led to something new. And it's so incredible to hear that there's so many young people that you're training in Reiki and everything as well. That's just incredible. Love that. So let's talk on ancestral trauma a little bit as well, and what we can often carry from other generations and lifetimes that we're not even conscious of, but that can have an impact on our lives here now while we're having this experience.
Absolutely. We were carrying it all before anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the car accident or like the pandemic, it brings it to the surface, and it brings it to the surface to be healed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the major issues around the world and in our society in the US, it's bringing it to be healed during this time. And what I've noticed a lot that people started to have a lot of trauma about government harming them, not being safe, just this overwhelming. And when we worked through hypnosis, so not many people are doing ancestral hypnosis healing. I've been doing it now for quite a while. And because I would say that the majority of clinical hypnotherapy is focused on research-based studies. And so this is a little woo-woo for them. But what I've
Mm.
found is people have shown up and said, I'm having a lot of body pain. I feel like I'm going to die.
Yeah.
People might treat that regular as an anxiety, but when we went into the hypnotic state, what came up is like a great great grandmother was like, oh my God, I had to leave this country because this happened, and then we got sick and we died, and we had to heal and kind of bring that energy over into the other side to release the person. And so what I've been seeing is some of the fears are money fears, right? Makes sense. Scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
famine. There's not going to be enough toilet paper. We all heard that craze because we saw the craze about that. Like
Yeah.
that's a deeply seated, and I was just like, get a bidet, people, get a bidet.
Yeah.
Uh, so, or, there's always water, but it was just even crazy where I live as well. And so this frenzy of food stockpiling of all this also brought up, some of our great great grandparents. My parents left their country, but
Mm.
my great great grandparents also left their countries, and their great grandparents left their countries. Like my family has left a lot of countries, but for
Mm.
many different people, even if they've been wherever they are for 400 years, there's still a history. So I would say, if you're feeling something that you could ask yourself, wait, where did my family come from? So I'd say write down some of the stuff that's coming up. Is it scarcity? Is it fear of not having enough food? Is it fear of dying? Someone in my class the other day did a ancestral journey hypnosis that I offered, and she felt really not well after, and she called me. I mean, she wrote me, and I said, look into your family line. I think you're worried about losing your children because there are a lot of women in your family line who lost their children.
Mm.
And I feel very strong that you're going to be able to get evidence for this. It's not you. You're carrying this ancestral trauma. She was able to talk to her mother and her grandmother. She found out that her great grandmother had lost 4 children
Wow.
after birth. Her grandmother had also lost and not talked about it. And her mom did not, but had the fear too, and they had never talked about it. So nobody had talked about it really until she asked. And then she was able to release it, and I gave her the mantra of, it is now safe for me and my children to coexist in this world. It is safe for me to trust. My intuition is strong, and I know that if anything comes up for my children's welfare, that I will know what to do and I'll be able to support them. And so that's just one thing, but it's really around safety. Sometimes it's around making money. Sometimes it's about overwork. Like I had the overwork ancestral trauma.
Mm.
Overworking, like I was feeling like the immigrant energy. Like my parents came into this country and it's like we had nothing, and you had to work, work, work to get through everything. And I've been healing that. So it could also be about children. It could be about marriage. It could be about fear of men, fear of women, fear of intimacy. It could
Mm.
be fear of building a business or coming out as a healer, right? Because as we talked about earlier, ancestrally. So one of the ways that I would say we can heal it is write it down. Ask then around in your family, hey, if let's say it's a financial thing, have you ever felt like you have to work really, really hard and you'll never get ahead? Your
Mm.
mom might be like, oh my God, that's how I grew up, and my grandmother. And you might be able to find like that there's many different people in your family that kind of carry that energy. And they might think it's a fact, right? And so then you call it out. Like I've said it out loud to my family. Like, do you know that we all really work really, really hard? Like we've done 2, 3 jobs at times to get through school, to do this, to make sure we're safe. I was like, we need to like just pull back and enjoy life more and do more. And they all were like, oh my God, you're right. It's an ancestral thing. So calling it out, people might not respond to you, but it just starts to make it lighter because
Mm.
anything that festers in secret or in the unknown or in the subconscious doesn't get a chance to be healed. So
Yeah.
have conversations, share with people that might understand. And then I would say to you to maybe do something as a symbolic energy, like light a candle and say, I release this, or write it down and burn it, or take a special healing bath, or just a regular shower and say, I release this ancestral energy, or I release this block right through space and
Mm.
time, and I claim my own sovereignty at this time. And you can say whatever word you want, amen, so it is, aho, whatever is something that resonates with you. And we can start to release it that way because it's up, it will come up during these times.
Yeah. So fascinating. I just love it. And, it's so funny as well. The more I learn, the more I'm like, oh my God, we're so clueless. But that's not to say, like there is no solution or anything like that. No, like that, as you're saying, even with just that little reflection on it or, setting that in symbolic intention or saying a mantra or having that intention of, to cleanse all this ancestral trauma or pain, because like that as well, it needs to be brought up. And that's what we're seeing on the collective as well. That's why there's so much mayhem, because there's been so much buried for so long. It is the collective unconscious that needs to be seen, that needs to be raised in order to be healed. And like that, it can happen very easily. It doesn't have to be a big whole rigmarole, but we need to be willing to do it, and not run and live in fear and resist, because that's just going to prolong it. So I love just touching on that as well and the importance of it. And, again, it just even highlights to me as well sometimes, and even in my own journey, how limited, especially the Western world is in our thinking, in our approaches, in our systems, whether health, education, everything. It is so limited that we really are kind of at a disservice to ourselves.
Absolutely. And something that, calls up, because an ancestral trauma could be like, well, that's the way things are. That's a belief.
Yeah.
Well, leave it alone. Leave it alone. That's the way things are. No, question it. Why does it have to be like this? No, it doesn't. Because some of these traumas or these beliefs, they worked 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? They may have defended us or protected us 200, 300 years ago. Right? Like, let's not talk about if we've lost children because we have to keep moving forward because life is short. Maybe that's what happened. Let's work hard because, we don't know how, if we're farmers, what's going to happen with the blight this year or what's going to happen with the weather. Maybe it worked back then. And now I think, like, as you said, in the collective unconscious, in our personal unconscious, it is being brought up to be cleared.
Yeah.
And it can be that simple. I love the word you use, rigmarole. We don't need it doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be dramatic. A question that I love to ask folks that I use a lot is, what belief do I need to shift within me in order to experience what I'm wanting, right? So applying that, let's say I've gotten a lot of people who come from generations and generations of single moms. And if they were listening and they were saying, what belief? Well, the belief that men suck, that men leave, that nobody wants to stick around after they had, the babies. This could be a case. And so when we started, what belief do I need to release or transform? Oh, wait, I need to transform the belief that men leave, that people leave, that we have to do it alone. And when we start to at least know it, it may not happen overnight. Obviously, it's all a process. But then we can call it out of the darkness. And we don't call it a fact anymore because people sometimes come to me like, no, this is the way it is. They all leave. And I'm like, all right, it doesn't have to be that way. And so
Totally.
when we start to like really breathe into that energy, well, what is possible then? If this thought wasn't moving through me, that this is the way it is, this is the way it is. Okay, let's breathe. Oh wow, it could be that somebody could really want to be a dad or a mom, if it's a same sex or two dads or however it goes. Oh wow, I could have a relationship that the person really is actually seeking a beautiful family and a deep, intimate, spiritual, physical connection. Oh wow, this is possible. And that's how we also even start healing because we allow the
Mm.
possibility and the hope to take root within our hearts.
Yeah, so powerful. And I love your question as well. Question our beliefs. Yeah, we kind of need to debunk our own beliefs and stories that no longer serves us. Because obviously some of them still do, absolutely. But there are loads that we've just been handed down, that we've just embedded within ourselves and been conditioned with, that actually are holding us back now. So it's super important. And like that, yes, it can take a little bit of time to unravel, but it doesn't have to be difficult. We just have to be willing to do it and to explore and to be curious. So again, it comes back to something that's mentioned so many times and throughout different conversations. And I mention it so much, and in my work, it is that self-responsibility.
Yes.
I don't have to just take on all these things and be a certain way. I have the capacity to question and be curious what's right for me,
Yes.
now as I move through my life. So super important. But just before we wrap up as well, because you do hypnotherapist as well, is there any self-hypnosis tips or things that people can do to help, bring themselves maybe more into a state of relief or calm, as opposed to in that high stress, fear state?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would say that we already got some of those tips, like
Mm-hmm.
try to get away from others, and even if they're sleeping in the next room, get into the bathroom, do what you need to do, to at least close the door for a moment and say,
Yeah.
Mommy needs some time,
Mm-hmm.
or Daddy needs some time. And when you do, or even if you can sit in the sun by a window, something that brings you pleasure, right? Like, but if you can't get that, whatever you can get it'll work.
Yeah.
And then just noticing your breath going in and out, right? And as you notice your breath going in and out from an objective perspective, not one where I have to count, I have to do this, just allowing it first to go in and out. And as you notice, just go in and out, and just notice the quality of your breath, right? So you're bringing your focus back to your body, bringing it back to your breath. You notice it going in, going out. And as you allow it to go in and out, you just allow yourself to drop into your heart. And some people are like, what does drop into your heart, right? So it's just, you could take your right hand, put it over your heart. And as you allow yourself to do that, bringing in these thoughts, that is that the mind, the heart, the spirit of each human being has unimaginable resources. And so we have more resources than we could know. And so when we allow ourselves to go in this calm spot, we can access those resources, right? So everybody has access to this. Also, the idea and the feeling and the knowing that healing can happen easier than we imagine, right? Healing can happen easier than we imagine. And when we allow ourselves to feel into those thoughts, like, I have more within me than I know, healing can happen easier than I imagine. And allowing yourself to just go deeper in those breaths. And then saying to yourself, take 3 deep breaths. And I'm going to allow myself to imagine a beautiful place in nature, right? Or a place that brings me much joy, that is real or not real, right? You've been there, not been there. And it's a place of perfect peace and perfect calm, where I can access my inner resources, when I can tap into my inner calm and love and flow. And just saying that to yourself, and you're just still observing your breath going in and out. And then you take those 3 deep breaths, right? And you take it in, and we exhale, right? And then we allow ourselves to take another deep breath in and exhaling. And we're going deeper. And then we take another one in. And then we go deeper. And imagining that beautiful place. And just knowing that all we need is 3 deep breaths, right? First listening to our heart, observing our breath. And knowing that all we need is 3 deep breaths to just go into this place of peace and calm. Mm. And it may sound very simple, but if we practice that, right? So I tried to give you a little bit of an experience by talking you through it. But knowing this, that when we have the resources within us, that 2, we can access them at any time. And that 3, that healing can be easier than we imagine. And by just taking these 3 deep breaths, we're already in a process of healing. And so these mantras just start to bring us calm, right? And I'm going to give another one too, which is, it is now safe for me to be here. Because sometimes our system's going haywire. It is now safe for us to be here. And it is safe for me to be here now. It is safe for me to be here. It is safe for me to be who I am. And you can choose a different mantra. Some people might need, it is now safe for me to make more money. It is now safe for me to love or open my heart. But even just the basic, it is safe for me to be calm. Because some people don't trust calm. They trust hyper energy, always moving on, what's happening, and over vigilant, hyper vigilant. We can trust calm, because when we're calm, we're going to get that guidance. And the guidance is going to help us in one way or another to manage our lives.
Oh, amazing. What a beautiful, beautiful little practice as well. And I instantly feel more calm and back centered in my body again from even just listening to your voice and doing the breathing, putting the attention on my breathing again. And those mantras, I absolutely love them. And yeah, you're right. Like, it doesn't have to be difficult. We have so much capacity within ourselves, but like that, it's experiential. We won't know the power until we start doing it and build that practice. And then, opening up to new levels of consciousness and hearing that guidance or knowing it even clearer, it's just magic. Vanessa, I have thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation. I loved every second. I love your wisdom, and thank you for sharing and bringing back the Bruja. And please share where people can find out more or follow you and your work. And like always, I will link everything in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much, Karen. I've loved having this conversation. I'm so glad we've met and connected. And just excited. Thank you for having me. If anyone's interested, you can follow me on Instagram through the Biz Bruja. And you can also read more about the work that I do and the classes that are coming up at the School of the Healing Arts, the School of Healing Artes, on thebizbruja.com.
Amazing. And like that, I will have everything linked as well. But I wish you continued success and brujaness.
Yes, viva la bruja.
Viva la bruja. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get notified every time a new show is released. Get more information on this week's guest as well on my website www.soulpowerlight.com.